Hello, and welcome to this brief moment of reflection on a very topical issue. I am Marta Gibin, Research Fellow in Sociology at the University of Bologna and member of the Scientific Committee of the section Sociology of Health and Medicine of the Italian Sociological Association. This brief interview is part of an initiative promoted by our section called PILLS, which aims to cover health sociology topics of public relevance by inviting guests from inside and outside our section. In today's PIL, we will discuss the topic of loneliness. And to do so, we have invited Professor Marja Aartsen from Oslo Metropolitan University. Professor Aartsen was one of the keynote speakers invited to our midterm conference that took place in Forli in January 2025. Her presentation generated a lot of interest among the conference participants. We have therefore asked Professor Aartsen to go through the highlights of her presentation with us today. As we believe that the subject matter is definitely of public relevance, so a perfect fit to our series of pills. Marja Aartsen currently works as research professor at NOVA, Norwegian Social Research of Oslo Metropolitan University. She is a social gerontologist and specialized in longitudinal research on social relations, social exclusion, loneliness, and cognitive functioning in the second half of life. She's interested in social issues related to aging in place and active or successful aging. She's part of many research projects and collaborations on the subject, and also associated partner in the EU-funded Home Age Doctoral Network, advancing research and training on aging, place, and home. So welcome, Professor Aartsen, and thank you for accepting to participate in this field.
Thank you.
So in your presentation at the conference, you talked about the so-called loneliness paradox. So the first question is, what is the loneliness paradox and how has it been explained by the literature?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you first for inviting me to talk. It's, I think, a very interesting initiative of your organization to have these interviews. Yes, indeed, I spoke in January about loneliness, and in particular, the start was the loneliness paradox. There is a loneliness. People call it the loneliness paradox. Paradox is that we see that loneliness is high in countries where many people have lived together with the partner, live together, have many opportunities to meet other people. So, for example, in the Nordic countries where the frequency of social contact is lower than in, for example, Greek or south of Italy, or where many people meet on the street and are more sociable than, for example, in the Nordic countries. There you would expect that prevalence of loneliness is high in the north, where people do not meet so very often with other people, or maybe some other people live in the countryside where they do not see their family member every day, maybe even not every week, but sometimes only once a month. And there you see that the prevalence of loneliness is low in countries where people do not meet so very often. And that is what we call this paradox, because you would expect the opposite. You would expect in countries where many people are meeting each other and are very sociable, that loneliness would be low. And then this is already seen in, I think, the first study that noticed this was in 1990 already. This was by two Finnish scholars who found this. And they were one of the first who noticed this and say, this is actually against our expectations. Why is this? And what they said, well, maybe it has very much to do with the culture of a society. So if you live in an individualistic society where people do not meet so often, like in the north, people do not expect so much from other people. And therefore, if they do not meet so many other people, then probably the expectations are lower, and then they don't feel lonely. Whereas on the other side, if you expect your family to come every day and they don't come, then you feel lonely. So they were one of the first to focus very much on more on the social context. So if you look at research on loneliness, very, very often they look at the individual level. So do people meet? Are they healthy, and so on. But we forgot to look at the social context, and I believe that we should look more at that. So coming back to the paradox is precisely that there is a contradiction in what you would expect and what you see.
So in your presentation, you stated that we need a sociology of loneliness. Why do we need a sociology of loneliness, and what kind of contribution it can provide to the topic?
Yes. Yeah, it's true that in the presentation, I sort of argued we should need a sociology of loneliness. So if you look at the two disciplines, sociology and psychology, who have been working most on loneliness, then what we can learn from psychologists is very much how it is going on the individual, inside or with feelings and so on. Whereas sociologists look much more towards what the social context is doing to people. For example, group pressure, but also culture and norms, and how institutions in a society put pressure on people to act as in a certain way. And so that is why I was arguing for the sociology of loneliness, because we precisely what we need to do now to progress the field on loneliness is to look much more at the social context. Because if you look, for example, at interventions to reduce loneliness, they are hardly effective. Many reviews on loneliness interventions show that the impact is very, very small. So we somehow do not understand precisely what's going on with loneliness. There is, maybe you could call it that way, that we have a sort of fundamental lack of understanding how loneliness how loneliness comes across, how people become lonely. Sorry for that. So together with my colleague Bianca Suanet and I, we have been thinking what we should do next is really look more at the social context, and there we differentiate mainly between two aspects of the social context. One is the culture, and what we already mentioned there was the individualistic, collectivistic dimension, but there is more culture. Also cultural aspects that we did not take into account. One cultural aspect maybe is, for example, how people treat older people. Are they part of society or are they excluded from society? Ageism is a term that comes to my mind now. So do people judge other people because of their age, and are they no longer part of society if they pass a certain age? All these things are contributing to people feeling lonely or not, or feeling part of society or not. So that's one thing, the culture. The other side is also the structure. So if we think about institutions, for example, mandatory retirement age, that is something that you could say, okay, people in certain societies are not allowed to work after the age of 65. For some, it's ideal because they look forward to stop working, but there are also people that really want to continue working. And if they are not allowed to, well, then they feel really excluded. And social exclusion is a very, very strong predictor of feeling lonely. So if you're feeling not part of society, or if you're feeling to be excluded from a group where you really want to be part of, well, then loneliness is a very logical consequence. So these things, and in addition to, I think, these structural and cultural things of society, there are also other things. For example, the fear of wars that we are now in the middle of what's happening. Think also about the United States at the moment. I think there is a lot of distrust at the moment, distrust towards the government. Distrust is a very, very strong predictor of loneliness as well. So I did research on loneliness. If you look, for example, at Europe at a very small scale, well, small scale, it's Europe, but if you look only at Europe, not at the world level, but only at Europe, you see that people in former 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 Soviet countries, they are much more lonely than in the west of Europe. So Eastern European countries, you see that loneliness is extremely high as compared to the West, because people have a lot of distrust in other people. So this is typical things that sociologists study and not so much psychologists. So all we know now is thanks to psychology. So there's a lot of things done, but for the next step, I think we should look up to what's going on outside the individual. So there was the plea for a sociology of loneliness.
Sure, thank you. So our conference focused on the life course perspective, an approach that looks at how the state of health is conditioned by what happens throughout an individual's life. So how is sociology of loneliness linked to life course theory?
Yeah. That's a good one. So again, my colleague Bianca and I have been working on a sociology of loneliness. We have written a paper on it. It will be published in a book this summer. Hopefully we will publish this book, or otherwise it's in the autumn of this year. And there we combine this sociology of loneliness with life course, with the life course perspective, because as you can see in life course theory, we also consider the youth and how transitions in life are made are important predictors for how people in later life function. So for example, if you grow up in a family where one of the family members is an alcohol abuser, then you start in your very young life already with fear and with mistrust. And this, you can see it's accumulating over the life course. Some people can recover, but that is always the case with life course. You can see, and some people have a very positive trajectories, whereas others, you see this the accumulation of negative things. The life course is very important. So we focus in this theory, the sociology of loneliness, partly on the social context, but also how over the life course transitions are defined also by the social context. Well, again, the retirement transition, that's a very important transition in life, but also can be a very important moment that people start to feel lonely. That is one transition that's also very much defined by the society, by the structure of society. But also I think how the life course is organized. Is it do you follow a very standardized life course, or is there an increasing destandardization that has much to do also with increasing loneliness or so. So yes, life course, and that's one thing, the transition. Then of course the time where you are born or the place you are born, these things are equally important. And then of course some people have agency, or we all have agency, and some use this agency to get out of this, well, if there's a negative spiral, or if there is this accumulation of disadvantages. Some people are able to get out of it, but get out of this negative spiral. But yes, so for the sociology of loneliness, the life course is very important. The life course perspective is very important. Yeah.
Okay, so I think we have now come to the end of this brief moment of reflection, hoping to have stimulated interest in the subject. Thank you very much to Professor Aartsen for the insights and reflections on this topic. And thanks also to those who listen, and goodbye to the next spiel of the Sociology of Health and Medicine section.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.